Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Oulton Park for the second round of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. A very different race in store this afternoon from the one that we had very late yesterday afternoon, which opened our 2024 season. That took place in dry conditions. It was a fabulous race, actually, one of the best races of the day, and it went right down until the last few laps, really. Today's race, though, very different conditions. We've had an awful lot of rain. It really hasn't stopped raining since probably the middle of the night or so. It is, well, about 0.3 of a degree warmer ambient temperature than it was earlier on this morning. The track temperature climbing slightly, but it's wet. It's going to stay wet, and I don't really think it's going to change much as the rest of the day goes on. And that means that drivers who excelled yesterday are not necessarily going to be the same ones that we see setting the pace in race number 2. It's a very competitive grid of Ginetta GT Championship drivers that we've got assembled for 2024, and I think that these conditions could be a little bit of a curveball. Yesterday's race really boiled down to a battle between Scott McKenna and McKenzie Douglass. Scott McKenna had pole position, lost the lead at the start of the race. McKenzie Douglass managed to get past him, but then Scott McKenna came back at him through the middle part of the race, fought, eventually got the lead back, only to pick up a 5-second time penalty for exceeding track limits on the final lap of the race, which then demoted him back behind McKenzie Douglass, who went on to get the race win. Right, did you get all of that? I hope you were taking notes, because that wasn't the only action that we had in yesterday's race. There was a fantastic battle going on for 4th position between Nick White and Luke Garlick. That was settled by less than a 1/10 of a second. Alex Toth-Jones and Connor Garlick, they had an excellent battle as well. There was a little bit of paint traded across a couple of these scraps, but it was largely a very clean and very exciting race. We're hoping for more of the same now in race number 2. So cars released out onto their green flag lap even. They've had a lap from the pit lane. I haven't yet been notified as to whether they're going to get 2 green flag laps. I think we probably will still see 2 more green flag laps, because actually when leaving the pit lane they take the short loop through the Foster's circuit on the way to the grid. So they haven't yet ventured out to the top end of the international circuit here at Oulton Park, which they're doing so for the first time now. And of course, because of the change of conditions since yesterday, it's very likely that we will have 2 green flag laps just to allow them to generate tyre temperature, but really more than that, to see where the worst of the standing water is. When we do start the race, though, this is the order in which they're going to start. It will be Scott McKenna, winner on the road yesterday, who has pole position by virtue of setting the 2nd fastest time in qualifying yesterday. McKenzie Douglass will start alongside him. Matt Shaw, moving up from GT Academy, starts 3rd, alongside Xentek Motorsport's Luke Garlick. And it's Connor Garlick, teammate, starting 5th on the grid, ahead of Nick White for Raceway Motorsport. Then, row number 4, Alex Toth-Jones, still trying to learn the car, really, but should be a factor, I think, now in this wet race. James Townsend will share that 4th row with him. Row 5 is where you find Carl Garnett and Paul Livesey. And the back of the grid, Sean Fleming will start 11th and last. Now, you will have noticed there on the grid graphic there are Pro and Am drivers. Pretty self-explanatory, really. You score points within your class in this championship. So McKenzie Douglass and Scott McKenna, who were 1st and 2nd overall yesterday, were also 1st and 2nd in the Am class. Matt Shaw was 3rd, but the Pro class for Douglass and McKenna. Shaw the 1st of the Am's home, and he'll be hoping to try and double up on that here this afternoon. On board with Paul Livesey, starting 10th on the grid, exactly where he finished yesterday. Actually had quite a lonely race yesterday, did Paul. Dropped off the back of the field, wasn't really able to keep up with some of the battling cars ahead of him. However, Nick White was rather more in the thick of the action. Like I said, only just pipping Luke Garlick. Now that battle, I said, was decided by less than a 1/10 of a second. That's actually not quite how it went down, because Luke Garlick picked up a 5-second time penalty, so they weren't together on track. There is Luke, also carrying one of our onboards, and Luke Garlick was pretty feisty yesterday. A few of them were not afraid to get their elbows out, actually, in the pursuit of track position. It is one of those circuits, Oulton Park, where it's difficult to overtake, especially in the wet, really. There is one sort of definitive faster line, typically around the outside of the racetrack. That can mean that if you're going to overtake, you've always got to put a bit of a block pass in on the car ahead, and that can sometimes end in tears. The race has started, by the way, so the time has started ticking down, as has been the norm today, really, with 2 green flag laps. So the race has officially started, but we will have the 2x2 rolling start at the end of this lap. Got a glimpse there of Carl Garnett. Now, Carl Garnett's car, I don't remember having all of that white bodywork on the front of it yesterday, so I think that maybe he'd sustained a little bit of damage in race one yesterday, Saturday, I mean, of course. They've had to replace that bodywork. There you can see him coming towards us there. Normally just a grey front to that car, I seem to recall. There, though, is Scott McKenna, the 2019 Ginetta GT5 champion, who looked as though he was going to claim a victory yesterday. It wasn't meant to be. In the wet, though, you would be really rather foolish, I think, to be trying to exceed track limits, so I'm hoping we won't see quite as much of that today. This isn't really a racetrack where you tend to see a lot of track limits infringements. It's usually on the exit of Old Hall, Cascades or Lodge corners where the track limits infringements can occur. But there isn't a huge amount of time to be gained from it, and certainly in the wet, get out onto those painted curbs, the concrete, green painted concrete beyond them, and you are asking for trouble. Quite a lot of standing water, isn't there, down here at Hislops, more so than we had earlier in the day, I would say. So it's going to be a bit of a voyage into the unknown, this, for the drivers. But this being essentially the top tier of what makes Ginetta racing these days, we are largely, even within the AM class, looking at drivers who have a few years of racing behind them. So I'm sure they should be able to scope the conditions out and get by just fine. On board again there with Paul Livesey. He's going to have a face full of spray in about 30 seconds or so when the race gets underway. But at the front of the field, it's going to be interesting to see what happens between our, well, I say front row starters. I'm actually not convinced we're going to get a side-by-side start. Or are they now pulling into side-by-side? No, they are, aren't they? So we are going to get the 2x2 rolling start. The lights are out on the Ginetta safety car. And we're going to end up with about 17 minutes of racing, hopefully safety car free, but hopefully not free of some of the real entertainment that we had on Saturday afternoon. So through Lodge Corner, the Ginetta safety car will peel into the pit lane, and then it is all eyes on the starting gantry. Those red lights will go out, and round number 2 of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship will burst into life here at Oulton Park. Across the line they go. On the inside line, the pole sitter Scott McKenna. On the outside, McKenzie Douglass. Who's going to have the line? Who's going to have the grip? It looks as though McKenna got into Old Hall Corner ahead. Does he exit ahead? There is contact in the midfield. Matt Shaw into the side of Nick White, I think that was, and Shaw has damage to the left, well, actually left front and left rear by the looks of it, of the number 33, and unfortunately last year's Ginetta GT Academy rookie champion is out of the race as we head out of Cascades. On board with Nick White, who seemed to get tangled up with Matt. You can see both the left front and the left rear wheels pointing at a very odd angle on car number 33. That is a real shame. Now, at the front of the order, that is Luke Garlick, who's made the jump into second. So Luke started from the outside of row number 2, 4th on the grid, and is second as they arrive at the Shell hairpin for the first time. There is the recovering Nick White, and there, unfortunately, is Matt Shaw. Now, with all of that suspension damage, I do wonder whether he'll be able to get that car out of the way. Certainly he won't be driving it away. Can the marshals push it through the mud and get it to a place of safety, or are we going to need the, technically, I suppose, second appearance of the race of the Ginetta safety car? On board with Nick White, good run over Hilltop. Carl Garnett is our target, but Carl is not making it easy, covering the middle of the road there, leaving almost a Ginetta G56 sized gap on the inside line, but not quite enough of one for Nick White to squeeze through. No obvious damage on the number 57 car, is there? So I think he survived that skirmish with Matt Shaw relatively unscathed. The leaders, meanwhile, are at Druids, and it's really this battle for second that looks the most entertaining, with Douglass forming the filling in this Luke Garlick and Connor Garlick sandwich. And it is Luke Garlick who has got the jump, hasn't he, into second position. Connor Garlick now moving up to challenge for third. Almost sails straight into the back of the Fox Motorsport machine, but doesn't. Avoids the contact and looked to try and get a good exit from Lodge, but just a bit too eager on the loud pedal. The rear snapped and out wide he went. So did well to avoid losing control of the car completely there. Across the line we go then, 1 lap completed. There are waved yellows at Old Hall Corner, but not yet, touch wood, any sign of a safety car. That's good news. Matt Shaw is out of the car. You can see him stood watching the race with the marshals, and hopefully it is deemed that that car is far enough off the racetrack that we don't need to pause the race. Around Cascades we go then. The lead gap 2.8 seconds, McKenna to Luke Garlick, who isn't exactly scorching away from McKenzie Douglass. Douglass will be a bit frustrated here, I think, really, that he wasn't able to make more of his front row starting position. You could argue that starting on the outside in the wet is the better place to be going into Old Hall. But he didn't really get the jump, did he? McKenna had a nose ahead going into the braking zone, cleared him by the apex, and it's possible that when they then came back together around on corner exit, that's where Luke Garlick saw his chance and carried a bit more speed down the avenue. But he's now got to try and defend this second position from McKenzie Douglass, who is in the spray. Can't actually see him initially as he comes over hilltop, so poor is the visibility. Looks to the outside, nothing doing. Looks to the inside, still no room. So Luke Garlick hanging on. They're not going as quickly, anything like as quickly actually, as Scott McKenna out in front. And now Recovery JCB is on the scene to drag Matt Shaw's car out of the way. And hopefully they're going to do that under double waved yellows. It looks like they will, so no need for the safety car. A big twitch going into Druids there for Scott McKenna, who is certainly pushing hard. I mean, look at this. He's making this look very, very easy. The car is moving around a lot, but it will in these wet conditions. Scott McKenna, though, is more than experienced enough to know how to handle them. Luke Garlick in second position. Third place then for McKenzie Douglass, who is at the moment the only one of the top three never to have won a Ginetta Racing Championship. McKenna and Garlick ahead of him, both former GT5 champions. Now there goes Nick White. Where's Nick? He is 8th at the moment, still struggling actually to get past Carl Garnett and James Townsend. Townsend in 6th position leads the AM class. In fact, this is the fight for the podium places within the AM category. So James Townsend, who we can't see at the moment because he's in front of the car ahead of us, he leads in AM car number 3. Carl Garnett, just ahead of us, is 2nd in the class. And Nick White, who we ride on board with, is 3rd down through Cascade. It's a job just to see where the edge of the road is, let alone to try and figure out where the least standing water is and where you might be able to find some grip. Garnett seemed to do it well, though. Looked as though he was on the tail of James Townsend heading down the Lakeside Straight. Cut away to the overall second place battle. All of these drivers running in the pro class. Hopping over the curbs through the Britain chicane. There is Conor Garlick's car. You can see the front of his car taped up a bit after a skirmish that he had in Saturday's race. Leader again pushing on, purple sectors all round for Scott McKenna at the moment. Oh my word, Conor Garlick supremely late on the brakes. Almost it looked too late on the brakes, but contact averted. Back to the AM class battle. Nick White peeks to the inside, not really trying to launch an attack there, just literally so that he can see where he's going, see if he can spot the braking point. Then ducks back in line as he approaches the corner. He's trying everything here, Nick, but just can't find a way around Carl Garnett, who, unlike Nick, has been racing this specification of Ginetta for a little bit longer. Nick White moving up from GT Academy, where he was the champion last year. But James Townsend ahead is not proving easy to shuffle out of the race lead. Who gets the better run out of Druids? Does that yield an opportunity maybe into Lodge Corner? They're all going to the inside of the track. Nick White stays to the inside, whereas Carl Garnett goes to the outside, trying now to get that switchback and carry the good speed through Deer Lead. That might just work. He's got the run, he's got the momentum, he's got the overlap, and he's got the inside line for Old Hall Corner. But is that going to be enough to put Carl Garnett into the AM class lead? He's almost level with Townsend in the braking zone, sails off into the corner. Townsend himself actually gets sideways, and Nick White has to throw the anchor out to avoid running into the back of him. And it is Carl Garnett then who will grab the advantage, heading down the avenue, but not by much. This is still very, very close between all three of them. But now Carl is in clean air. He's got no one holding him up. He's got full, well, relatively full visibility. He might just be able to pull away, and that will only further incentivise Nick White to try and get on with this, because Nick was the quicker of these three in qualifying and in Saturday's opening race. So he knows that if he can get past Townsend here, he might have an answer for Garnett. There's no way through on the inside at Shell, so he goes to the high line. Now, does Townsend leave him space on corner exit? Well, he tried to, actually, but Nick had already decided to bail on that one. Very, very close indeed as we head towards the Britain chicane, but Nick White can see every time he peeks out of line to try and have a go at James Townsend, he can see Carl Garnett getting further and further away. Decent run out of the Britain chicane, pulls to the outside. No, James, I'm not going to try and overtake you here. Oh, maybe I am. Jinx back to the inside line, very late on the brakes, but not late enough. And James Townsend turns into the chicane in front. I think James possibly rolled off the brakes for a moment there, just carried a bit more speed into the chicane to see off that particular challenge. Now the Luke Garlick, McKenzie Douglass and Conor Garlick train is still rolling as well. They are now 6.5 seconds nearly behind the overall race leader. Here comes Nick White meanwhile. Typically, as soon as we took our eyes off this battle, the move was made. Nick White past James Townsend into 7th place overall, but more importantly, 2nd within the AM class. So we'll see now whether he can go after Carl Garner. McKenzie Douglass starting to get frustrated, maybe stuck behind Luke Garlick, knowing that Conor Garlick is waiting in the wings to take advantage if he makes even a small mistake. Down towards Cascades we go again. The 5th lap of the race. New fastest lap set by Scott McKenna last time was a 56.2. These are lapping in the high 58s, and in fact for Luke Garlick a low 59. So Luke Garlick was 3 seconds slower than the race leader that time around. McKenzie Douglass almost gets the overlap on him heading for Island Bend. But no way through into the left-hander, but does look as though Luke Garlick is just starting to make a few little mistakes now. He's starting to drive a bit more defensively. And it's perhaps only a matter of time now before he leaves the door open. Douglas with a good run out of shell, but just nowhere to go. It's such a narrow racetrack. If you're going to go offline, you'd better be certain that it's going to work, and that the drivers around you are going to give you the space to get back in line if it doesn't. And of course, that's the big problem, really. You make a move, or you attempt to make a move. If it doesn't work, you can very easily get shuffled out. That's the fear, really, for McKenzie Douglass, who doesn't really know which way to go. He wanted to take the racing line into the Hislop chicane, but then at the last second jinked to the right to cover from Connor. They all stay in the same order. Through Knickerbrook Corner they go. See the sticker at the top of the windshield coming loose on McKenzie Douglass's car, the middle of these three. That won't be affecting him too much, not impeding his vision. Certainly not slowing him down. He looks arguably like the quicker of these three. Certainly the qualifying times and yesterday's race pace would suggest that to be the case. But track position is king around here. And if he can't find a way past Luke Garlick, then it's only going to be the bottom step of the podium at the best. Thinks about the inside line at Lodge, but looks very sketchy into Lodge Corner, doesn't it? A lot of standing water offline. Can he get the better exit, though? He has Luke Garlick left half an opening? I think he might have done. Here comes McKenzie Douglass, almost squeezed towards the pit wall. No, door slammed in his face, but that was very, very nearly the move that he wanted to make. There's now further contact at Old Hall Corner. Douglass does very well to stay on the island and keeps his foot in it. Tries to carry the momentum now down towards Cascades, where he will have the inside line. And is this McKenzie Douglass moving into 2nd place? Yes, it is. Fantastic stuff. Out wide goes Luke Garlick. Connor will now try to take advantage as well, but I don't think he's been able to do it. Well, maybe they're side by side as they head for Ireland, but no, Luke Garlick manages to stay in front, and McKenzie Douglass at last, he thinks, has broken through into 2nd position, but only after a very brave move round the outside at Old Hall Corner. He nearly got to the inside into the first turn. When that didn't work, he just thought, well, I might as well commit to the outside line, and eventually that was enough to give him the position. Now here comes Conor Garlick, looking for the move on Luke, who's possibly been knocked off his rhythm now. Just needs to try and get his head down. Just not panic, not overdrive. Look how close they are, almost pushing each other over the top of Hilltop. In fact, there might have been a bit of Morse code being tapped onto the back of the number 71 car. Here comes Connor to the inside into Hislops. No, doesn't go for it, then gets a wheel on the grass turning in. This is very, very close quarters racing, and when you're this close together with the visibility this poor, so easy to make that minute mistake that could prove incredibly costly. So over Clay Hill they go again. We've got just under 6 minutes to go. In the sectors, now that Luke Garlick is released into clean air, he's still not able to match the pace of Scott McKenna. So Scott McKenna looking good out in front. Luke Garlick perilously close to the edge of the road at Druids. Just managed to get off the corner in front, though. Is there a move to be made at Lodge? Maybe, but ultimately no. Conor Garlick is certainly not going to make life easy here, is he, for Luke, who looked a bit wide to me through the middle of Lodge, but came off the corner well enough. And continues to hold on just about to a podium position. Through Old Hall Corner they will head. Oh, and Luke Garlick really takes the wide line this time around, and it does not really work. He gets out onto the curb on the exit of the corner. Had it not been for a bit of snap oversteer from Conor Garlick, I think they would have been side by side heading into Cascades, but Luke again lives to fight another day. But this is a great demonstration of wet weather driving. It looks to be getting wetter out there as well, doesn't it now? I think the rain is intensifying. Conor Garlick way wide onto the concrete runoff area at Cascades. But if the standing water is starting to get worse, that means the spray is going to be getting worse as well. That's going to make Conor Garlick's job even harder. Now, this is the battle for the AM class lead, and Nick White has slowly but surely been closing back in on Carl Garnett. They are now 6.3 seconds clear of James Townsend. So James Townsend's gone from this battle altogether now, and it is once more Garnett versus White. So Carl Garnett trying his best now, the former Mazda MX-5 racer, to grab an AM class victory. In yesterday's race, Matt Shaw, of course, was the AM class winner over Nick White, and Carl Garnett was something like 22 seconds behind Nick White. As off onto the grass at Knickerbrook goes Conor Garlick. That was a big, big moment. Again, did well to gather it together, but I suspect that that is largely been caused by the fact that he can't really see where the edge of the road is. It is exceptionally difficult when you're less than a car length behind somebody in these conditions to spot your reference points that normally you wouldn't come close to missing in the dry. Certainly somewhat of Conor's ability, but Luke Garlick using everything that he's got here to his advantage. Now, what can Nick White do about Carl Garnett? He's had a much better exit from Cascades, but Carl Garnett knew it and hugged the white line down driver's right, heading underneath the Paul Warwick Bridge. Nick White is still coming, though, and is desperately late on the brakes, slides through, gets to the apex, stops the car. That was a lovely bit of driving from Nick White, and Carl Garnett probably thought he had that one covered, but Nick found a gap, only just a small gap, but he found the gap and went through into the lead of the class. So Nick White up into now 6th position overall. Crucially, the lead of the AM class, and I think he's probably got the speed now to pull away from Carl Garnett. Down through the right-hand kink at Denton's, big hump in the road just there, just as you hit the brakes into Cascades, which, as you can see, can easily unsettle the car, but Nick White is starting now to put his foot down and get away. So that really now largely means that this is the last battle to be resolved for the bottom step of the pro and overall podium. And it's between the Garlicks, Luke and Conor Garlick, both of them looking pretty evenly matched. I think Conor perhaps is a fraction quicker, certainly seems able, doesn't he, to close in at will on Luke. But what he can't do at will is find a way past him, unfortunately. McKenzie Douglass, we just saw there, still in 2nd place, just did an outright fastest first sector. But it was only a 10th faster than the leader, who is 13.2 seconds further up the road from him. So I think it's fair to say Scott McKenna shouldn't end up losing this race, even if he were to pick up a track limits penalty. It would make very little difference now. Brilliant noise these Ginetta G56s make as they blast over the top of Clay Hill. Around the double apex right-hander at Druids. Where can Conor Garlick make the move? Of course he wants to make it cleanly, he always would, but especially given the fact it is Luke that he's battling. He's just got to try and outfox him, try and force a defensive move, force a snatched break or a little bit of opposite lock on corner exit, and just try and get that extra bit of momentum over the number 71 car that will allow him to drag through. And of course, Luke is also now wise to the fact that he needs to be covering off the line that Conor Garlick wants to use. So you can see him going very wide there into Old Hall Corner, covering off the line that Conor was trying to take. Again, that's something you see quite a lot in oval racing, trying to take the line away from the car behind you. And Luke Garlick is doing that splendidly at the moment. We are on the final lap of the race, by the way. So round number 2 of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship nearing its conclusion. It's been another thrilling race, perhaps not for the win this time. Scott McKenna, from really turn number 1, has always looked likely to win the race, but some fantastic battling behind. Hopefully we'll get a few more cars on the grid as the season goes on, because it's still a great place to come racing. And we are certainly in for a treat. I think it's going to be a very competitive season. Scott McKenna has perhaps this weekend set his stall out as the fastest driver on the grid, but not by a lot in the dry, really. In the wet, I think his experience is starting to tell, but if we get more dry races, which we should, hopefully, as the year goes on, I think he's going to have his work cut out, and there are a number of drivers who could be set to challenge him, including these two, I think, ultimately, as the year goes by. Luke and Conor Garlick, who still are debating 3rd position. Luke still ahead of Conor, as they head out of Knickerbrook Corner, but well ahead of them. Scott McKenna is already at Lodge. The body language of the car tells me he's still pushing, even on this final lap of the race, and he doesn't really need to because he has utterly dominated the second round of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. He sees the checkered flag and wins here at Oulton Park. This one, he should get to keep. McKenzie Douglass will come home second. This is the battle for third place, though, and Conor Garlick is going to try and send it down the outside to try and get the switchback and the run to the line, and he might just have timed that to perfection. Out onto the curb goes Luke Garlick. Conor Garlick has got the run. Get the photo finish camera ready. This could be very, very, very close indeed. Too close to call at the line by 35 thousandths of a second. Conor Garlick managed to do it, not even at the last corner, on the exit of the last corner of the race. He managed to find just the 35 thousandths of a second that he needed, and Luke Garlick ends up off the podium in fourth. Alex Toth-Jones, after a quiet race, is fifth, with Nick White claiming the victory in the AM class. We're on board with Nick now as he begins his victory lap, and my word, did he have to fight for that after that early skirmish at Old Hall Corner, which delayed him, knocked him down to at least third in class, picked his way past first James Townsend, then Carl Garnett with a couple of brilliant moves, and went on to win the class. Scott McKenna will probably be wondering what all the fuss was about after that race. We all thoroughly enjoyed what was going on behind him. It's just a shame, really, that he wasn't a part of it, but having set the fastest lap of the race on the final lap, he has well and truly made his point there, hasn't he? But to prove my point a little bit, even though he set the fastest lap on the final lap, McKenzie Douglass in second also set a personal best, and only a tenth of a second slower. So even in the wet, Scott McKenna and McKenzie Douglass, not a lot to choose between them. There wasn't really a lot to choose between the Garlicks either. Look at that, 35 thousandths of a second, blink of an eye stuff, and it was Conor over Luke, but it could so easily have gone the other way. That was a terrific battle. Conor Garlick timed that run off Lodge Corner to perfection, went all in, and managed to come out, not a winner, but at least a podium finisher. So, another brilliant race from the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. They'll have another one to entertain us with later on. It's likely, I would say, I'm not a weather forecaster, but it's likely to be in similar conditions to the ones that we've just seen, and that actually bodes quite well, because I think it should still be a very, very competitive race. So, Scott McKenna, the winner, by 13.5 seconds. No track limits penalty to worry about this time. McKenzie Douglass came home in second, a fighting second, whilst Conor Garlick picked Luke Garlick by a nose at the line to claim the bottom step of the podium. Luke was fourth, Alex Toth-Jones was fifth, whilst Nick White went from the front of the Anfield down to about third and fought back again to take the class victory over Carl Garnett and James Townsend, 6th, 7th and 8th respectively. Paul Livesey and Sean Fleming complete the top 10. Matt Shaw, unfortunately, was out at the first corner with suspension damage. So, a fantastic second race for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. Let's take a look at some of the highlights. At the start of the race, Scott McKenna did his very best to try and hold on to the advantage off the line, which he managed to do. All of the drama really was behind him, as former GT Academy rivals Matt Shaw and Nick White were both in trouble. Shaw had contact with another car, and Nick White went onto the grass in a void, and Shaw was out, and White had it all to do to try and reclaim the lead of the class. This was the battle for the AM class victory. Carl Garnett first slipping past James Townsend, before Nick White would eventually find a way through as well on the run over Clay Hill. He then set about chasing after Carl Garnett to do battle for class honours. Meanwhile, within the pros, it was the fight for second place that was keeping us entertained. McKenzie Douglass, with a brilliant move around the outside at Old Hall Corner, managed to relieve Luke Garlick of second place, and he then scarpered off into the distance, leaving the Garlicks to engage in what was a fascinating duel in very challenging conditions. Nick White, though, seemed to have the conditions mastered, slipped up the inside of Carl Garnett at Lodge Corner, and claimed the AM class lead, a class he would win in the end by 2.5 seconds. But it was Scott McKenna who managed to claim a victory on the road for the second time, but this one he gets to keep in round number 2.